VALHEIM, the Viking-inspired classic versus Enshrouded, the dark fantasy newcomer. On the face of it, both of these games get compared quite a lot, but they're actually really different. So we're going to investigate that today, show some similarities for sure, talk about the good and the bad points from both games, and ultimately decide which one is the one that you should only play forever and never touch the other one. Okay, let's calm down folks. You can play multiple games, you can love both of these games, no need to get upsetty spaghetti. I'm being baity with the thumbnail and the title of course, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting only play one game over the other, but you know, for the views, for the algorithm, let's make it a little bit interesting and keep count of some of the good points that I think each game does a bit better. With both of these fantastic games releasing out of early access next year and going more widespread to different consoles and platforms, now's the time to compare both. My name's Jade, I've been covering survival games and open world stuff for 10 years now. Leave a like if you find this video interesting or useful, and let's go. Let's talk early access impact. VALHEIM, of course, launched in a very unique time during the COVID pandemic, and it certainly helped with their explosive growth. Of course, there was some really dark times for everyone around the world, but gaming was a lot of people's escape from the realities. Players were seemingly gravitating to new games, new experiences to share with friends and family that they haven't had time to play before, and this is where VALHEIM entered, selling over 5 million copies in its first month. It was praised for its stability and depth despite being unfinished, and of course that emergent gameplay that you could play with 1 to 10 players, community driven with mods and servers added on top of that, and VALHEIM just exploded. Would it have had such an impact if it hadn't launched during that COVID period? Probably not, to be honest. Certainly big, certainly viral, but nowhere near the levels where it sold 12 million copies as of 2025. The impact for VALHEIM cannot be understated. Every article was talking about the fun, the moments, the clutch examples of rescuing your gear from your death bag, even enlisting helps of groups, the body recovery squad to get you to your objective. I'm sure your pets and your partners are really glad your VALHEIM craze has finished, as they were sick of you recounting your epic tales or the crazy sounds that were coming from you and your friends as you played and explored this Viking fantasy world. VALHEIM really cemented the idea that survival games didn't have to be overly punishing with their systems, instead a survival light game. Sure, it's got a focus on preparation, but it's more about your skills rather than arbitrary counts of your food running out and eventually killing you. You don't actually die if you don't eat in VALHEIM, but you probably won't get far unless you're well prepared with some good meals. The game's really clarified as an adventure game rather than survival by its own developers, and that team is relatively small even today. First starting off as a solo passion project back in 2018, it was available on itch.io under the name of Fade. Eventually they scaled up to the heady heights of 5 developers by the time it launched in early access, and even today it still only has around 12 people working at Irongate Studios. VALHEIM, although it had a publishing partner in Satisfactory developers Coffee Stain, there was no overhyped reveal at a gaming show of its trailer. It really was just going under the radar until its release. It was more word of mouth. Players remembering that game they tried a good few years ago now suddenly coming out properly, albeit with a new name. Enshrouded was a little bit more hyped up, having announced its reveal trailer the year before, generating a lot of hype. Comparisons were immediately drawn between VALHEIM, but with a mashup maybe of Zelda and Breath of the Wild. This wasn't King Games, the studio's first rodeo. They'd been around the block a while, with their biggest game being Portal Knights, Minecraft-inspired fantasy survival, with gameplay centered around traveling to different islands, using portals, and leveling up the 3 different classes of Warrior, Mage, and Ranger. Sounds a bit similar? Definitely the DNA for Enshrouded began with Portal Knights. They'd also been around a long enough time to have made mobile games, supported other studios, and even dabbled in Anno, yes, that strategy sim building game on the Nintendo DS. From 30 developers up to maybe 60 at the current time, goes a long way to explain why Enshrouded have managed to fit in their early access period within 2 and a bit years compared to the 5 years ongoing for VALHEIM. Enshrouded only actually launched in January 2024, a huge amount of updates. It sold 1 million copies in its first 4 days. People loved the visuals and the RPG mechanics. but with a much more traditional story. In Valheim, you're just a regular Viking that has been dumped on Valheim, and now you have to go and prove your worth to maybe Odin to resurrect you and fight on in other battles and adventures. Enshrouded, you are effectively the chosen one, the last remaining people of a race that you'll now have to reconquer your lands, taking care of the enshroudment to free Embervale of its destructive ruins. With a lot more story, a lot more quests and a lot more NPC interactions, you will play this more like a traditional game similar to something like Skyrim, with perhaps a deeper focus on your traditional experience of leveling up and choosing your classes. But for sure, Valheim feels like the winner here. Unique to that period with COVID, making everyone and their mum suddenly sit down and start playing games together. That cozy vibe it's got, that sense of accomplishment once you start to get to grips with the game, I think is pretty unique. So for impact, the freshness of it, the uniqueness of it, I think Valheim definitely wins for me. Both have done incredibly well, but Valheim, fast approaching 12 million copies sold, and the cultural impact, I feel like Valheim is the clear winner. So moving on to world, progression, combat, base building, bosses, and our final thoughts. Let's look at progression and the biomes. The meadows in Valheim give you an opportunity to build your start shacks. While it's easy in your first few days of getting hammered by a few boars, and once you master the art of blocking or dodging, it's relatively rare for you to die unless you're under attack from some of the raids that can happen, triggered by different progression stages every so often. But lighting, as I said earlier, the way the game just feels, even if you're not a fan of the retro graphics for the main characters and enemies, there's still something very special about building your peaceful life in the meadows. Now the boss fight for this is relatively easy, Ekfir, the giant deer god, but it does give you the opportunity then to go and mine more resources that you'll find in the Black Forest. And this is where the danger lies. Build too close to it and you'll be constantly hounded by greylings and grey dwarves, with the occasional marauding troll. But that first moment when a troll just comes bounding along, I think most of us have probably pooped our pants a little. Ever searching for circling cores in the undead burrows? It's a step up in difficulty for sure, and you will die as you try and get enough copper and tin, but not insurmountable unless you spend way too long alerting everyone in there with the chopping or mining. And while I don't want to relive the game beat for this video, because hopefully the majority of you guys watching this are fans of Valheim or Enshrouded, it's still important to give just a little kind of idea of the joy and excitement and sometimes the frustration of exploring Valheim's different biomes. After defeating the boss of the Black Forest, it's now time to move on to the swamps, and this is really the make or break for people. The sheer amount of enemies with debuff hitting attacks, whether it's leeches sucking your blood to the blobs infecting poison, not to mention the draugrs, the wraiths and unholy abomination trees. The swamps to many feel like this giant leap in difficulty, but you get such a sense of accomplishment when you start to work out how to survive, grabbing the ingredients to make yourself anti-poison potions. Always making sure to build up as much food as possible, especially with stamina to jump and get out of the way from the leeches and anything else that will be trying to grab you. By the time you've got through the swamp, you're absolutely prepared for anything the game can throw at you, till about 2 seconds later when you have to venture into the mountains. To be really honest though, it is slightly easier because at this point you've got used to a lot of the combat moves, and although there's new enemies to contend with, like wolves, like Fenrir, like the cultists that you'll find in some of the ice caves, and not of course forgetting the flying drakes, it's dealing with the cold that presents some of the biggest problems, and scaling and looking for the drake eggs so that you can summon their mother, Moda. I'm going to talk about bosses in its own segment later on. The plains then ramp it up a lot, but not by some of the enemies you would think. It's the death squeetos that are everyone's main annoyance. These flying little buggers come out of nowhere. One little prick and you'll be cursing at the screen as you now have to traipse across different landscapes to retrieve your bag. The annoying little green goblin fuelings getting stuck in the tar. It quickly overwhelms you, but the thing is, the plains is one of the prettiest places to build a base. Up to this point, taming some boars and maybe some wolves has been the order of the day to get yourself furs and leathers, but now we've got our first chance at a proper mount, the locks. Like a lot of things in Valheim, it's pretty simple how to tame creatures. Just drop some food they like, hopefully not get too close while they're munching, and eventually you'll be able to pet them. If If you don't want to be traipsing across the whole world looking for boar scraps, then it's vital that you start up a boar farm as soon as you can. And although the Lox seems pretty cool to ride, it's relatively still a little bit useless, although it's had a few buffs since it first got introduced. For sure though, the taming in Valheim isn't as complex or maybe as needed as in Enshrouded. So we've already got through a whole bunch of different biomes, and within this journey, this is what Early Access launched with, all of these biomes. My first playthrough of Valheim to get to this stage took 80 hours. In terms of content, the challenges, if you're into the game and you overcome it, there's nothing really like it. And while the developers get beaten over the head quite a bit in terms of the slowness of their updates, subsequent ones that have arrived like the Mistlands, Ashlands have absolutely added a ton more to the game, even if they do border on the frustrating rather than fun at times. I've obviously been painting a very good picture of Valheim here, and that's not going to change, but of course you've got to recognise some of the hiccups. The Mistlands has been very contentious, with an overwhelming amount of feedback stating how hard it is to survive, and just the actual pure mechanics not being able to see in front of you. For a game known for its difficultness in actually achieving success, this took it to a new level. With eldritch horrors, Jarl, massive flying ball bags that would spit acid and fire off ticks at you, to the seekers, crustacean, maybe arachnids hunting you down at every turn. This biome has been extremely hard for a lot of players to really feel attached to, even if it does look absolutely amazing when a storm rolls in and it's lightning through the mists as well as lighting up the seas. The grind to search from one of these clusters of heavy jagged cliffs, island to island, looking for the materials to summon the boss, found a lot of players feeling really frustrated. And once again, Valheim's kind reputation now for updates that would provide challenging gameplay, then somewhat nerfed in hotfixes after, continued. Starting off in the middle of Valheim, of course, we've been venturing in any direction you want, but for progression you have to go south towards the Ashlands and then all the way back up to the north for eventually the 1.0 update and the Deep North. Now, a lot of people will debate which was worse, the Ashlands or the Mistlands to conquer. For sure, there's certainly not as many people that have managed to finish Ashlands. Imagine Normandy, but with Vikings on D-Day. It's a battle of attrition as you have to deal with lots of flames destroying your base unless you've got protection, never-ending waves of the charred skeletal warriors seemingly modelled after Terminators that will come and attack you at every moment unless you start destroying their spawn points, chucking reskinned blobs, this time setting you on fire, flying Valkyries as well as vultures, and not to mention even getting here is problematic unless you've got the drop from the previous boss. I'm trying to keep spoilers to a minimum here, a little bit at least. The waters alone will boil you alive. It took significant months, even with the PTB that Valheim has produced pretty much for every single update for players to test ahead of its full release, to really nerf this to make it somewhat actually enjoyable while you're trying to conquer the lands. The Mistlands did introduce magic, and that's really on show in the Ashlands, often compared to be one of the better ways to get through. And instead of dungeons like we've encountered in the Mistlands as well as the swamps, this time you'll be mining the precious metal oil in the middle of lava fields that you'll have to contend and parkour over with using basalt bombs. Again, something that ended up getting nerfed quite heavily, with players complaining that they simply didn't have time to survive trying to gather the precious metal before they sunk underneath. The payoff, portals that would now transfer your metals, previously restricted, now you could freely go through any of the portals as long as you had these much larger portals ready. There are still so many things to talk about with all of these biomes, but like I said, I'm trying to keep it relatively brief. Just to give you the sense and scope of this idea and progression, maybe especially for players that actually haven't played Valheim, that have been maybe Enshrouded stands. Ashland's final piece are the forts that you have to conquer using war machines like catapults and battering rams. Try and break through or sling yourself through to go ahead and take care of the unarmed turrets as well as any other potential enemies. Your rewards, being able to socket gems onto new weapons and give yourself new elemental status attacks, which do really give a bit more choice and abilities with Valheim, but somewhat still a little bit underwhelming that you can only really reach this stage and be able to do that by the end game. There are other components of Valheim, of course. With each new biome you've got unlocking the ability to get new materials to build bases from. new upgraded ships, and even new mounts with the Asvin that you can ride into the lava if you really want to. You do come across multiple NPCs if you're lucky enough to find them, but some players can go through a whole playthrough and not have found the first trader. And that's all they really are, just traders to go ahead and buy some nice goodies like increasing your weight or lighting the way with a special circlet. And that's the big thing that both games have. You need to kill the bosses for progression, and I guess that's pretty similar for lots of games, right? But in Valheim, you really do need them to progress and survive in each biome. Whereas in Enshrouded, it just basically allows you to go through a certain shroud that would have killed you instantly, and then you can go and explore the land freely. So for that reason, it does make Valheim, to me at least, a more compelling game. It very much really centres on what kind of gamer you are. Do you really like the guidance and the comfort of knowing exactly what you're going to do and where to go? Or do you like the freedom to explore, learn from mistake, death, and sometimes quite a little bit of pain? Throughout its early access, Valheim has improved stuff, adding new gameplay settings to make it as easy or as even tougher as you would like. But it is somewhat creaking under the weight of just so many resources and so many crafting options limited by UI that really could do with a fresh redesign. With one of the biggest complaints of all being the lack of massive inventory space, that looks to be on the change, with developers noting that so many feedback from fans is to increase it with backpacks or something similar. Valheim has a cozy system, much like you'll find out in Enshrouded, and they do relatively similar jobs, giving you extra stamina and abilities for healing or just rest whenever you've got a nicely decorated home. And while I've not gone too mad talking about the base building available in Valheim, it is fantastic what you can do. Beyond just making Viking huts, there's been some really creative ways that players have managed to build just crazy villages, houses or cozy little cottages. With the farming of your crops, fishing now adding more complexity and trying to catch all fish, Valheim seems to be ticking all the boxes, albeit slowly, for what players have asked for. That said, if Valheim had actually released as a 1.0 game instead of early access, I don't think there would have been any actual complaints. It's a game that's been taken care of with attention to the details and testing as well as the PTBs. Like I said, sure, sometimes they get it wrong with the difficulty and the scope of the game, but by and large, their approach to quality over quantity really has resulted in a very stable game. So that's my case for Valheim, I guess. Let's take a look at Enshrouded's progression and the world that you explore, and we'll circle back to the content we're kind of expecting for 1.0. The lands of the Ember Vale are filled with very similar type biomes, although maybe in different orders, each with their own unique challenges, and for sure in terms of setting up bases, some gorgeous locations, or especially if you want to take over the ruins of a town, or fort or a village. The verticalness of these different landscapes really sets it apart from Valheim 2, the way that you use your wing glider to get across the landscape. But none of it has really ever evoked the same feeling that I had with Valheim. Like, some places are amazing in terms of looks and the visuals for certain biomes, and I absolutely love some of the villages and ruins that you can come across, and the dungeons are well designed with an emphasis on avoiding lots of traps as you try and explore and conquer spires that allow fast travel to bigger points in the map and then being able to glide down. But yeah, let's go through some of the biomes. The starting area, which is a bit more forgiving and friendly even than the meadows of Valheim for sure. You'll learn how to hopefully tame some creatures, set up your farms and build your lovely bases, with a lot less threat given there's no base raiding either in Enshrouded compared to Valheim. What you'll also notice is the vast swathes of the red mist, the shroud, that will block you from going through, as I mentioned before, by killing you. So you can only explore the blue shroud for now, and that becomes somewhat limiting. Beyond the way that you can cheese and try and get up cliffs or dig a massive tunnel through certain places, the way you're meant to progress really is about exploring some of the shrouds you can gain access to and eventually finding the boss for that zone. So pretty similar to Valheim, I guess. It never really feels like the drops that you get are really going to matter for the exploration or really needed. There's nothing really that's going to set up a new complete crafting bench. It's all just about upgrading your flame. I mean, sure, you get new recipes, you'll find new stuff that your NPCs will have unlocked every time you go and defeat a boss, but it just doesn't have that same feel as Valheim does for reward and much needed exploration. The flame altars are a huge part of the game. They act as fast travel points, again comparable to maybe the portals that you can have in Valheim. But it's much easier in Enshrouded to go across the landscape. With the grapple hook accompanying the glider as well, it really does have a lot of traversal methods that are pretty cool. Dangers will lurk in every biome at night time, and you'll be doing the usual hunting other creatures like wolves and maybe some hares. But Enshrouded for me just doesn't have as many of them wow moments on your first playthrough. Like getting control of a glider's fun until it almost immediately crashes to the ground because you've got low stamina, whereas the first time you set sail on your raft on Valheim, you will not forget that. Like for sure, it's not a bad looking game, it just doesn't offer that same feeling, that feeling of exploration, and that's natural because it is an RPG, and this is where these games really do differ, and they may really only suit one type of player if you like survival games that don't hold your hand, or RPGs. Anywho, let's dive into some more of the biomes. Perhaps we will find some that do give me a little bit of more feeling. Next up is Enshrouded's take on a swamp or maybe deep forest, almost jungle experience. The Black Mire. Filled with bubbling tar and mud, there's plenty of the Vukar, the little Ewok style looking creatures, to worry about. This is effectively their home biome, even though you do come across them in little camps elsewhere. So it's pretty dangerous, you've got to be careful about where you tread. And then you have the little sub-biome, the Revelwood, almost jungle-like with the amount of trees and shrubbery and stuff, but yeah, maybe more of a deep forest. You definitely need your parkour skills about you, as even just a one wrong move in the tar can often kill you if you're not able to get out quick enough. There's plenty of places to jump and expand and explore because you do need to use these jumping flowers a lot more. But discovering this place and trying to find some ways to get to the points of interest and explore, it does start to present a bit of a problem for Enshrouded. To keep things maybe somewhat a bit of a mystery is that whenever you get a marker for something, it will show you the area, but you never get directly shown to whatever it is you're looking for, a scroll, a recipe, a weapon, or an enemy to take on. And there's also not really any direct pathing or the best path to take. That's something you're going to have to learn, which is okay, but you'll find often or not you'll be trying to cheese yourself upside cliffs, ended up going in the back hardest route into a place rather than the actual way you're meant to, because it just isn't always that standout clear. So it can lead to a bit of frustration. Although it's got the markers, it's got the quests, it still probably could do with a little bit more help with that since it is a more guided experience. After this, you're then exploring the Nomad Highlands, huge limestone bluffs, and you've got the central Umber Hollow, the sort of mini biome that's pretty dangerous, thick with Shroud. And the Shroud is meant to be these challenging places, and for sure it can be. When that timer starts running out, you know you're going to die unless you find a little re-up or clearing where you can breathe fresh air. Likewise, it can feel like it's overdone throughout the game. Like, I get the premise and idea, it's meant to be this challenging place that you can go to rather than feeling like every biome is out to kill you, maybe like Valheim sometimes. But it does get slightly annoying when you just see it stretched across and go, yep, okay, know what I've got to do here to get through this red one. The areas start to get a bit brighter and lighter as we're going closer to the hotter regions of the map, and I do like building bases around here a lot more. You also relatively have good access to the Kindle Wastes, and again this is an area that you've got plenty of hot sort of desert-like environment to go and explore. And throughout this there's plenty of new creatures and new animals that you can hopefully bring back as livestock, from the goats to armadillos and a lot more. Each one of these biomes has special resources and almost upgraded or variants of the stuff that you might find in the Shroud. You really do have to have an amazing inventory system back at your base, otherwise you'll quickly become just lost in the sheer amount of different resources. And then we attempt the cold biome. This time it's the Albanese summits. It can be a brutally hard biome to go and explore. Imagine having the timer from the Shrouds just constantly on you if you haven't got the right kind of foods to keep you warm. Until eventually you kill a few of the creatures out here, or you've managed to craft yourself enough decent armour. And yes, maybe it's a nod, but they do have their own drakes as well. It's a huge biome and it really does make a good juxtaposition between this and the desert, and does have actually one of the more unique boss fights which we'll get into. And maybe having seen some of that criticism themselves with the game becoming quite samey with the same kind of repetition of creatures and the ways that you conquer stuff, the latest update to Enshrouded really does make an absolute huge impression. Wake of the Water has you exploring underwater, diving into tombs and facing all new enemies in the Drac. In some ways, I really wish this biome had actually come a couple beforehand, maybe a good opposition towards the desert. Often felt like the Albany summits could have been the pinnacle of the game. Nevertheless, I do love this update. The fact they've added water to some of the previous biomes as well, revamping the way that you can get lots of more epic and legendary weapons and gear. It's a much needed shot in the arm to stop things from being just a bit too samey. And it's worth pointing out, I feel like Enshrouded's got so much more bloat in terms of side content if you really love that kind of thing, and it's got some pretty challenging dungeons with the hollow halls that you'll find in each biome representing end game content for you and your crew. Especially you, if you're going to have to go for it alone, you definitely need to be the best version of yourself. So that's the case for Enshrouded. Which one has the better progression, the better world to explore? And I've got to say, it is Valheim. It has just given me them fresh feelings, that uniqueness with each biome that I've not really had until the very late stages of Enshrouded. The world of Embervale isn't bad by any stretch, but it just isn't up to the same kind of level as Valheim's uniqueness and approach in terms of discovering new lands, the way that your journeys across the sea can be so event filled or sometimes so boring. I'll cry and moan about the fact there's no decent inventory or space in Valheim, but that's what carts were invented for. 5 years on, I'm still looking forward to another roam around Valheim. So if you're keeping score, if you really want to, I guess like 3-0 to Valheim at the moment with progression and the biomes added to impact. Don't panic, Enshrouded's about to get some points. As great as Valheim's base building is, I still think it's leagues above anything else I've played. Enshrouded just has so much sheer choice. You can build all sorts and any kind of crazy medieval fantasy village, home, Viking hall, whatever you can think of. Maybe slightly easier where you don't have to really worry about the physics or actually realistic joints holding the buildings up like Valheim. But nevertheless, yes, there's so many different shapes you can access in Enshrouded, so many different blocks and materials, with the NPCs walking around, your farmyard animals, and just crazy amount of decorations. Enshrouded wins the base building aspect. So of course, in any game like this, combat's super important, and how you can customise your class and use a variety of different weapons and playstyles. And with this video already way longer than I thought it would be, I'm going to keep this relatively brief. It's a really tough one to choose. I like Valheim's kind of almost simple combat, but it is something you have to master and learn. And in that respect, what I basically mean is, it's a little bit rough around the edges. Both games have ability to use different styles, whether it's magic, or a little bit later in Valheim, ranged or melee. You can block, you can parry, you can dodge in both. But fighting enemies and creatures is definitely much more akin to something like Dark Souls with Valheim, and has often left me a bit frustrated. It's definitely had some improvements, but I still think it could do with a little bit more of a pass over before 1.0. You definitely feel more sense of accomplishment, and you are facing off against enemies that it doesn't feel as arcadey or actiony. So again, that's why you get that sense of like, yes, I did it. Because the game is just really challenging at times. You always need to be prepared, you always need to have the best gear. With a lack of actionable skills other than just your god powers that you can use with a heavy cooldown, I kind of do like Valheim's simplicity with its combat and stuff. But there's always room to do some special unique moves, and that's where Enshrouded probably beats Valheim just. It certainly needs more help with its camera lock-in for enemies, and it definitely feels a lot more arcadey, as I mentioned, but that's kind of the point. It is an action RPG rather than a Souls-like game. I don't always feel as much danger as I do in Valheim, but I do love the sheer choice in classes, accessing that magic much earlier in Enshrouded, just sheer amount of weapons, different playstyles, the unique skills that give you different perks and abilities. Enshrouded have gone ahead and copied somewhat the socketing system that Valheim has. Let's face it, it's not exactly a unique thing to Valheim. Every RPG game has pretty much added it. But it's a nice, cool little addition, and I love the fact that you can really customise your weapons even more, and again, relatively do this from early on once you unlock the ability to go into the shrouds. Maybe it's because I'm a bit of a basic bitch, or someone that struggles with harder games, but yes, the lock-on ability with Enshrouded does make a huge difference for players. It is just a bit more casual, and that for me is something I enjoy. At least in the day-to-day running around and combat. When it comes to bosses, it's a bit different. So a point for base building, another point for combat. Things are a little bit closer at 3-2 to Valheim. And before we get on to final thoughts and what we expect from 1.0, I do have to have a quick mention of boss fights. As you might have guessed, I've been a bit critical of Enshrouded not having more unique factions that populate each one of the biomes, or that it just gets repetitive, and that does transfer to the boss fights. The one exception to that is the Albanese Summit, heavily inspired actually by their Portal Knights game, which has the same premise that you land in a circle, fight a dragon in the middle of that circle as he fires fireballs and molten lava at you, pretty much dodging around trying to find its weak spot. And this is the only boss fight that I felt that, whoa, okay, this is going to be tough. Sure, the hollow halls can be really hard to beat, but this racketed up the epicness, the bombasticness of it all. And it's the one boss fight that's reminded me more of Valheim. From the very first time you start to stab at Ekvir, the giant deer god, as he's firing lightning around him, all the way throughout each and every boss fight, Valheim has delivered that epicness, that moment of oh my god. The fights in Enshrouded aren't boring by any stretch, but they just don't match what you get with Valheim. I'm not even into heavy metal music, in fact I hate it, but I absolutely love the tracks that come on when I'm about to get my groove on and start beasting a boss. Who am I kidding? Normally it's the boss beasting me. So another point to Valheim, please don't get too worried about this, 4-2. It doesn't mean I'm just saying only play one game. I do recommend you play both, or give both of them a good try if you maybe hopped off one. But in closing, I think when it comes down to the 1.0, with Valheim expecting the Deep North, you're probably going to assume I'm going to say it's going to have the lasting impact, or it's going to make the biggest splash, and it will for sure in terms of numbers, but the devs have been a bit cagey about a future beyond 1.0, and there hasn't been much talk about some of the other changes that we might have been expecting, like improvements to the oceans, or just general more improvements to the biomes that have come across, even though they have stated it in the past. But yes, I can guarantee with it also arriving on PlayStation and Switch, Valheim will make a huge impact. We know quite a bit about the Deep North now, but there's still lots of mystery around it. I've got to say though, I don't know if I'm as excited for it as I have been for some of the other biomes. I guess it's because it's been quite a while now between updates. In contrast, giving props to Enshrouded about some of the exciting stuff that's coming with their 1.0. I mentioned that I wish Enshrouded had base raiding. Well, they are setting up, if they're still sticking to their plans, some sort of islands that you can base raid defend on, maybe able to build on. I'm not too sure how that's going to work, but other exciting things are being able to transfer your character to other servers. And no, not just by choosing it from a different menu, but actually teleporting from within your world to their world in a more unique fashion. Also, sharing worlds looks to be a feature that's incoming soon too, whether or not that means you won't need dedicated servers, because you can literally share that save, much like Grounded has done in the past, or even Fallout 76. It does sound pretty cool, alongside their event systems also that I've listed on their roadmap. And again, they'll have their own splash, having not launched on Xbox like Valheim, they'll be giving it console users a real fresh experience on both main platforms. So I do like the sound of their 1.0. So for long lasting appeal, games that you're going to talk about in years to come, I think Valheim is still going to be the one that most people will reference if they're talking about that time they had with their friends, or the hardship and that feeling of progression and success they had by completing each and every biome. But with 1.0 content and stuff that could really revamp the game or add new features to it, it does feel like Enshrouded's just leading slightly. So a point each. Final score 5-3 to Valheim. It's just one man's opinion. You guys tell me I'm wrong. Tell me what you like about both games. Tell me what you hate. Tell me if one specific point that you want to write a 2,000 word essay in my comments really needs to be posted. Absolutely go for it. Until next time, Ratbags, I will be here for both of these 1.0 and any future updates. I'm intending to do a huge amount of new guides for Enshrouded ready, and likewise getting back into Valheim ahead of hopefully its release at some point in early 2026. Thank you so much if you managed to get through to the end of this, and I'll see you